When does my money become our money? That is the question that most couples avoid until they absolutely can't anymore because they start butting heads over finances. So today we're visiting with married couple Heather and Douglas Boneparth, who wrote the book Money Together. And today they're here to show us why fighting about money isn't actually about the money and how to get your hands around the deeper issues underneath the surface so that you can come together as a couple. We're going to get right into this. Welcome. If this is your first time listening, I'm Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. This is Love, Happiness, and Success, where growth-oriented people come to learn how to have better relationships, develop themselves, and create genuinely satisfying careers. So, Heather and Doug, welcome.
Great to be here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, and congratulations on the book. This sounds very interesting and much needed. I mean, this is a pain point for a lot of couples. So your book, Money Together, it opens with a question: when does my money start being our money? And why is this such an important question for couples to answer?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing that comes up so everyone's communicating, whether you're saying the words or not. Could be your body language. It could be the words you're not saying that are saying everything there is about your, feelings around money. And when you are not able to communicate and you're making assumptions about how a partner feels or is going to behave around things, resentment can take place. The negative emotions start to erode the relationship that you have with that person.
Douglas is a financial advisor who sat across the table from hundreds of couples over the years. And you cannot avoid the conversation forever. You cannot avoid money forever. You just may be having the wrong conversations around money, or not getting to the heart of what the feelings are behind the proximate disputes, disagreements that you're having.
One of the goals of the book is to create fairness in your relationship. And it's very difficult to do that when you're not having conversations around a facet of your life that's responsible for getting you to the goals, for the very things that allow you to feel as if you are that you have equity and that you are creating fairness between your partner. You can't strike any kind of balance unless you dive into this type of work.
Yeah. Well, so if it's okay to ask, I mean, so you two are married, and Douglas, you're in finance, and Heather, you mentioned being an attorney, and I'm guessing that you are two humans with relatively strong opinions about things. And I'm curious to know, if it's okay to ask, was there a point in your own relationship where perhaps you hadn't been talking about this or were not in alignment around money? And if so, how did that show up in your relationship?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it showed up in various times, but the time that was the catalyst for the work that we've done since, and I would say the biggest changes that we've made in our lives, happened during COVID, which I think a lot of people would say. When the pandemic started, our children were 11 months and 4 years old. I had spent about a decade as a lawyer at that time. And there was a time early in our career where I was the breadwinner in our relationship. And Douglas was just starting out his firm. And we really relied on the safety and security of my corporate safety net and health benefits and everything like that for Doug to be able to take risks in his career and really swing for the fences when it comes to his dreams, his goals, and professional ambition. But over time, and I think a lot of women experience this in the years when they have children too. I mean, pandemic aside, I was in a plateau of my career in the years, as a corporate lawyer, I'm experiencing a lot of adversity in the workplace and kind of a plateau when COVID struck. And, Doug's career was kind of taking off. And so, one day we looked around and suddenly he's making almost 3 times my salary. And when COVID hit and lockdown came, you start to tell yourself stories about whose time is worth more, whose career is worth more, who's supposed to shoulder the entire invisible burden that is happening behind the scenes, and the massive sense of responsibility to protect our family in ways that we had not ever really had to even question before. So throw that on top of the already difficult to manage, struggle of responsibilities in a household with two working parents outside of the home. And during that time, I had really shouldered a lot more of that burden and that responsibility. And there came to be a point, probably a year or two into it, where I turned to him and I said, I feel like I'm losing myself in all of this. What about me? And it's like I had made sacrifices in my own career for Dunn to be able to take these risks and really pursue what he wants. And now here I am, 12 years into my career, I'm buried under the weight of my day job as a corporate lawyer, moonlighting as Doug's business consultant for our firm at night, and being a full-time mom at the same time, all the time.
Yeah.
And, we reached a point where resentment was starting to build for really the first time in our, we've experienced a lot in our relationships. We met when we were 18 years old, 19 years old in college. And we've lived the lifespan of some relationships, I feel like, before we even got married. But I don't know if there was ever a moment where I experienced resentment towards my husband, which is, I think, a dangerous feeling to let simmer and sit for too long in a family. And I didn't like the partner I was. I didn't like the mother I was. I didn't like the employee that I was. And I came to him and I said, I feel like every day I go to bed, I feel like I'm a failure at all of these things. And I'm not so blind to the fact that it was not all my fault. This was something that had been built. Me having a piece of that, but also him enjoying the care that I gave him, the care of supporting the family.
Yeah, life was good. I was being man captain and really enjoying the growth of the firm and, getting basically control over my devices and everything. And all of that, was not serving Heather very well at all. And one of the most important parts here is that Heather had not only the intelligence, but the EQ to start the conversation with me. And I realized this is the person that I love. And we need to figure out how to create more fairness in our relationship at that moment, which really prompted what we've been doing for the next, 3 years up until now.
We very, very easily, like I think so many other couples, could have kept that status quo going for the next 20 years. Easily. I think it's harder to put your foot in the ground and say, to really say, something we're doing here is not working. I don't like the person that I am in this moment. I don't like the nature in which our relationship is heading. This is not what I envision for myself. And this is not what I want for myself for the next decade plus to come. So something's got to change. I think that that's the harder thing to do.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Well, and this is so interesting. And I'm glad that we're going here because you two are bringing up such a good point, which is that it's not just about money. You're talking about structural, like foundational, types of relationships that in every family, we carve out roles and responsibilities. Who does what? What is the hierarchy? Who has more power in the relationship? Whose time is valued as more important than others? And this is really what it comes down to, is that it's not just what are we doing with money? It is what is the nature of our basic relationship and how do we each find a balanced partnership. Because when it's out of balance, when one person feels like they are contributing more or not being recognized for what they are contributing, that's when the resentment begins. And to your point, that will eat away at the best parts of a relationship if you don't manage it always.
Absolutely. And you touched on an important point. Time is a currency. Time in itself is a currency. And so when we're not honoring each other's time, which is very easy to do when we allow time and money to be so deeply infused that we don't even see that we're undervaluing somebody else's contribution to your family, to your relationship. That's when we talk about finding fairness, we're not talking about how we divvy up the expenses and how we set up the bank accounts. We talk about fairness. We're talking about honoring everyone's time and honoring their contributions to the household, which are far greater than just earning money.
Absolutely. I have this conversation with couples that I work with around the balance of power that is happening when we're talking about time, money, career, and this idea that I think is difficult for some couples to grasp that you become a unit. That even if, Douglas, you're out there having this magnificent career and earning all kinds of money and many zeros on the end, you would not be able to do that without the partnership that was allowing all of this to happen. But if you're the star of the show, and Heather, in this situation, you're not being seen and respected as an equal in terms of decision making, that is not going to serve anyone.
Right. Ooh, can I drop one important point here? When we were talking about power in our book, I think it's very important to realize that an investment in one thing is a sacrifice in another. You do not operate in a silo, right? So investing in Doug's career did require an inherent sacrifice on my part, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't be more aligned with this notion that the partner that believes they're contributing through their paycheck and through their income, whether it's 3, 4, however many times greater, or they're the only one, financially providing. The easiest way, and you already said it, to shut down or point out how silly it is to think that that person has more power or is contributing more, is that, you said it, they would not be able to do that unless they had the contributions of that other person, however defined. And the second you say that, you just immediately destroy this script, this conditioning that we have, been given, or that has been instilled with us, not over a few days, not over a few years, for even older millennials like us, for decades.
Sometimes you observed it from your own parents, where you say that the time that deserves more value is time spent earning money.
Yeah,
that's a very common thing to believe,
and very gendered in many families. Not all, but many families.
And that's what we're referring to here. It's gendered from other generations and demographics that don't apply to today. It's from cultural backgrounds, even religious institutions. You go across the entire gamut of where these behaviors and scripts and thinking comes from, and you realize that we today are finally making our inches, away from that. And I'm very optimistic and, bullish, if you will, about the direction we're going. We were asked by a colleague, hey, do you guys feel optimistic? Because it seems like we're not really getting far with a lot of these things. But I look around to podcasts like this, to the content that we now have access to, the fact that there's books like Money Together out there to break these, very stodgy styles of thinking. And I can't help but to be excited about that. But Lisa, I got to tell you, simply acknowledging that one person cannot do what they do without the help of the other is how we very quickly, or more quickly, find ourselves playing the team game that needs to be played around money.
So let's go there, because I think as I'm listening to the two of you talk, there is the power of the we at work in this story. And this is a fundamental shift where you begin, I should say that you stop being two individuals in a power struggle around the way that things should be, right? And start operating as a whole, as a we, as a family. And that's when things change, because then everybody's individual contributions are respected differently. And I'm wondering if there was a moment in your own story where that shift kind of fell into place, that stopped struggling with each other, but really like, no, we're doing this together.
I don't think it happened once. I think it's happened several times. I think I can point to them. Because it's not just one. I think the first time was when I had to refinance my student loan debt with a private lender that was offering very, very favorable rates. And they would not allow me to do that without a cosigner. And Doug agreed. This was very, very early on in our marriage.
Yeah.
That Doug agreed to co-sign the loan. And it's a 6-figure tab. I graduated law school with 6 figures.
I hear you.
$217,000.
Jumped at the opportunity. Jumped at the opportunity to do it. It wasn't even like, can we do this? It's like, we're going to do this.
By Doug doing that gesture, it was a more romantic gesture to me because of what that student loan debt meant in my life, for the shame that I carried from that decision. Him doing that was a grander gesture than when he proposed to me on the steps of Lincoln Center in New York City. It truly was, because he was saying, my burdens are your burdens now. And I believe in you, and I believe in us. We're going to do this together. And that was
getting chills, Heather.
That was, by the way, though, but my parents, I'm an only child and grandchild on both sides of my family. My parents divorced in my early teenage years. For someone to model that for me was a huge, huge deal. That was not something like the level of trust and belief and faith in our relationship was demonstrated in that moment, like more than anything else anyone could have ever done, like truly. So I would say that was the first time. And there were many times after that. I mean, that one, I think and you're really important.
Thank you so much. That story is amazing, and I think conveys this really beautifully. And part of the meta message of your book is that what money really means is something that goes to very deep places. That money is a symbol for love. It is a symbol for security, for value, for worth. And that when we miss that about money, it's very easy to get into struggles about what are we spending money on? What should we do with our money that have nothing to do with the deeper core issues? I see this frequently in marriage counseling and also financial coaching for couples, which is a big piece of this, that it's so easy for people to get locked into these core beliefs about the way things should be and then try to lord it over their partner or control them without being curious about even themselves. Like, where is this coming from? Why do I believe this? Why does my partner have a different perspective? And so that's when these power struggles and this gridlock starts, is because you can't get to the deeper places. And so in your book, Money Together, I know that you have it organized around 5 different themes. Let's see if I can remember. We have beginnings, mistakes, contribution, power, and risk. And I'm wondering if we could go into some of that and get your thoughts or recommendations about how couples can start having these kinds of conversations together, because without that, it will create friction and frustration every time.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned being curious, right? There needs to be this thirst or hunger for curiosity here, and that's where I think beginnings comes in. I actually think this might be the most fun. It's the heaviest and deepest work in the entire book, but
because it's self work,
yes,
as much as it is couples work.
This is the self here, and the desire to learn about your spouse. And this is where you're going to get to not only share things that they might not know about you, but you learn things that you might know about them. Back to this idea that you've lived a lot of life, likely before you've met that. But even we've been together forever, but there was a solid 2 decades we were not together that really set the foundation for how we felt about money.
Well, and you can know the facts about your partner's childhood. It doesn't mean that you understand the stories, the feelings. And when you start to really have those more meaningful conversations, a lot of the money behavior you might see in them as an adult makes a lot more sense. And you can really build a bridge of empathy there, right? In understanding things that you just maybe never had access to because you just never talked about it. Like, I cannot tell you the number of couples that we interviewed. We sat in depth with more than 60 couples on multiple occasions. I mean, we spoke with more couples than that, but 60 couples in depth. And how many of them walked away saying, I just heard things from my partner that we've never talked about before. You may not identify with every single chapter in this book right now. They're meant to be a snippet, a snapshot, an era of someone's life. Maybe there's a piece of it you identify with, but maybe you just will someday down the road.
Sure.
And I just think it's so important to come back to this idea of like, in the stories that we tell each other and in the stories that you read in our book, you're putting a different lens on something that we all deal with every day, right?
We want you to obviously be able to move forward. And after you do this level of self-discovery and gain perspective from your partner, you have to examine mistakes or the things that, well, first off, are they mistakes or are they missteps? Right.
Well, that's actually something I was super curious about. So you say you worked with a lot of couples. Can you give me one example of one of the biggest mistakes that you see couples make?
Sure. I see people believe that, I think the mistake is believing that their partner had made a mistake when they in fact did not. And what that
they were wrong.
Yeah, they were wrong. Or a lot of examples of someone feeling like they saved the other person by fixing their mistake. And it wasn't a mistake. It was a misstep. And it's what it does. Like, hey, remember when I paid off that $12,000 credit card debt that you had because you decided to have fun from 22 to 24? Come on. Everyone makes, it's a lot of money, but that's not enough to like, alter the course of your financial life.
And the problem with that dynamic in your partner making a bigger deal about a financial mistake or, a financial misstep or something that you might regret or an unfortunate outcome from your past, making a bigger deal about that teaches you, the person who may already kind of regret that you don't deserve to have a say in your finances. It teaches you
trust yourself.
It teaches you that you are bad with money. And imagine you as their partner, like knowing that you're responsible for them thinking that. Because you created this like savior complex idea that like, well, when we got together, you had $8,000 in credit cards. And it's 20 years later, dude. You need to give her a shot. Give her a shot.
The narrative that like one person is not good with money, can't be trusted. So therefore, I will make the decisions. My say has more weight than yours. That's part of that power dynamic.
It's the worst.
It literally prevents that couple from being able to move forward and navigate their financial lives together. It is one of the most debilitating things that we've seen between two people when it comes to money. And it doesn't need to be like that.
Interesting. Now, let me run this past you. What about a situation where two people in a relationship have fundamentally different orientations towards money and have judgment about the other person's way of relating to it? So, for example, one person who thinks very highly of money, thinks we should have as much of it as we possibly can, fetishizes it to a degree. And another person who is like, I don't want any of that. I would rather have more freedom, more fun, be less encumbered, and not work so hard so that I can do more of what I enjoy. And getting into power struggles around that. So the message isn't that somebody doesn't believe that they made a misstep or a mistake. They're like, no, I prefer to live this way, and getting into struggles around how hard we want to work to create money versus how much time we want to have to enjoy our lives.
Well,
what do you say to that?
That is one of the reasons why we asked every couple we met with whether they have enough. And we asked them to answer individually, and the answers were incredibly enlightening.
Yeah.
I think it is really, really difficult. I will not discount how difficult this is when two partners are trying to fill up different size glasses in their lives.
What a nice way of saying that.
It is very difficult when one person's idea of enough is far different than the others. But I think the one thing worse than trying to find a middle ground there that both sides can be content with, because that's what enough is answering, right? There is no magic number. So the idea of enough, it's an amorphous idea. It's about your own subjective idea of what makes you content and happy in life. So you are allowed to have a different answer than your partner. But if it's so diametrically opposed, I mean, you really have to find a place to meet in the middle to really understand. And, as spending more than a decade plus as a corporate lawyer, negotiating many 7-8 figure settlements, I can tell you that the best compromises leave everybody a little bit uncomfortable. And that's the truth. We're not all going to get every single thing we've ever wanted in our life, right? But there has to be some level of contentment in knowing too that your partner has reached their level of contentment as well, right?
Yeah. I think it's also important to call out where the red flag is. And the red flag here is when one partner is not willing to do the work or have the conversations or is completely going to shut down, as opposed to, the discomfort that comes with finding what that compromise is. And,
and if there is no ceiling
Yeah.
on your idea of enough, that is a problem. If you are a never enough person, it is only a matter of time before that never enough. Oh, I'll never have enough money. I'll never have enough titles at work. I'll never have enough accolades. You will turn your partner into that moving target too. That is probably the one area where I would say, well, no, you just have to accept that your partner's a never enough, or that requires some work.
You got to go back to section 1. You got to go back to beginnings and uncover the thing in the past that has created that hole, that insatiable, unfillable hole in that person's life. And, listen, Heather is an attorney. I'm a financial advisor. We're not marriage counselors. We're not therapists, and we don't pretend to be. But there are professionals out there. When that red flag is raised, there are professionals who can help you with that. And I think knowing when you're at that point is also very important. But yeah, it's going back to finding out, well, why is that? Why are you that never enough, or why are you unable to compromise? Because listen, if you can't get there and one partner is not willing to do that, different futures are created for people.
But here's what's so, I think, humbling about life, and I'm sure you've seen this too in your practice, is that you may think or feel at one point in your life like you're a never enougher, and then something happens in your life and it completely changes your perspective, and you realize that you've had enough all along. And unfortunately, we saw that in our interviews. Doug sees that in his clients more often than we would like. And so we wanted to really provide that perspective too, that this, we all kind of live in this optimizing existence where we're always reaching, climbing, how can we life hack our way to something better? But I think it's important to provide the perspective, especially in a conversation about money, love, and relationships, that what you have and what enough is might already be here.
That's a beautiful idea. Because if you're constantly striving and clawing and working so hard, missing the plot until by the end of your life, then it becomes too late. And I've seen that happen many times as well. So this is really interesting to think about what some of the situations are that can create problems for couples. Another variable here, I'd love to get your thoughts about a couple where one person makes more money and has a mindset around my money versus your money, and really struggles with coming back into that we mentality and wants to maintain control over their money rather than move into a place of shared power and shared decision-making with their partner, who does not have equal rights because they don't earn as much money according to that logic. What do you guys say to that situation?
I have to really uncover why their worth, their self-worth is so intrinsically aligned to their financial contribution. Was it
and only their financial?
Only their financial. Again, we keep coming back to beginnings here because there's something that has allowed that script to be filled. And it does go back to your household. It does go back to your culture. It does go back to the things that
even
you've
experienced. Maybe that's what your colleagues do. Maybe that's what they say.
It's what's been fed to you through media, through social media today that perpetuates this type of thinking. And when things get so bad that you are not seeing your partner exhibit pain or frustration with the way that you are, and you yourself are unwilling to be vulnerable and explain why it is you feel that way, you have a very difficult problem on your hand. And as I said before, this is clearly beyond money at this point. And there is a different level of work that needs to take place in order to start to kind of heal that wound that's clearly there.
Well, so let's just go into this because, and I'll just say this as a therapist, and this might shock everybody within the sound of my voice. I mean, this is a very controversial thing to say. People can get insight all day long. Like, yeah, I feel the way that I do because this is how my dad was about money. And it doesn't change anything. It just knowing something about yourself or like, yeah, this was the way it was in my family is absolutely not enough to create different outcomes in the way that people operate, particularly when they still hold on to a yes, but this is the way that it is kind of mentality. They have their narrative of the truth. And so what I'm actually more interested in is when I just said that to you, some person who is like, I make more money, this is my money, I get to make decisions with it, and you don't because of that. I think that they can benefit from hearing an outside perspective that challenges their core belief that is attached to those old life experiences. So I would be curious to hear literally your opinions about what is the problem with that kind of mentality? And what works better?
The biggest problem is viewing money as the only valuable resource you can bring to a relationship. And the form, I think that is the biggest problem. And that's why the heart of the book is about contribution and redefining what it means to contribute. Because I totally hear what you're saying, right? Like, and we all know people like that. We all know
a lot of people. I mean, even people sitting in therapy, they can connect the dots all day long. It doesn't change anything.
I feel this way because my dad was also like this. Okay, yeah, fine,
exactly.
But I think that when we're looking at the bigger holistic picture of your relationship, are you really going to say that the only thing you offer your family is a paycheck? They're going to say, no, that's not what I meant. Well,
what do you mean?
What do you mean then? What else do you offer your spouse, your children, your loved ones? Let's talk about all the things. Let's put them all on the table because then we're having a conversation where we can really get to the heart of what our values are and what we bring to each other and our family. And I'm not saying that we might have to back into some change. I'm not saying to you, you should believe something different. Yeah, there's reasons, like Doug said, there's reasons you believe what you do. And there's reasons you feel the way you feel. Like you want to, I think a great example would be like a bonus, right? You get a bonus at work and you're like, I worked hard for that bonus. I want to spend it all. It's my money, right? I'm not saying, you do what you want to do, right? But when we have to open the conversation to a lot more, and then these changes start to happen, I think a little more naturally than saying we all need to change the way we think about money and just change it all. Change every way we handle it, right?
I want to know for the person, the questions I like to ask and the things I want to know from a person who has put all their contribution behind their ability to earn. What's their vision of a future together like with their significant other, with their spouse? Take me 20 years when you're not working. What is that? Are you going to paint me a picture of what your financial independence and retirement looks like in a silo and just expect the person that has supported you this entire time to be like, yeah, that's what I want to do too. And you start to have those conversations. More than likely, one, they'll start to see, what you're getting at here, and hopefully start to look at, well, my future is supposed to be, if they love their partner, it's together. Wait a minute, I'm talking about things that I want. I didn't ask once what we'd be doing together. And a lot of people, unfortunately, do assume you're just going to do what I think. It is a great way to kind of show someone who is aware they're doing what their dad has taught them, what their culture has taught them, by bringing them into a future that is up to them together to decide. You put them on the spot there, see what they have to say.
I also hate to say this and be like the truth bomb, drop a truth bomb here too.
Oh, I love truth bombs. Let's do it.
But you may be earning more today. You may feel like you've got the power because that's how you assign power and your perception of power in your relationship, which, by the way, is a problem in and of itself. If you really feel like you're in a tit for tat power over situation where you really feel like you're in competition with your spouse over who gets to have the most say based on how much they bring in. But it may not always be that way. It just may not. None of us know, even 5 years from now, right?
Wasn't always like that for us.
Where we're going to be. And so I think like you have to have some attachment to the reality that none of us really know where we're going to be. And so for you to like not want to play a team game now in a moment when it's suiting you and it's benefiting you, what's going to happen if it's not? How are you going to feel about it then? Because we've all seen it happen. Layoffs happen. Look at the environment we're in right now. You know, I mean, who's to say? So I would ask you to think about how you'd feel about it if you were not the one. You were not the one who had this perceived greater amount of control over the family's finances because you earn more.
Right. No, that's interesting that's a fragile position. And if your power supremacy is based on your earning potential and or ability and that the value that each partner brings to the relationship is dependent on that, what happens if you lose your job or your business or your health and become dependent? Are you now all of a sudden less worthy as a human? And do you no longer get to exert any control over big decisions that are happening because of that? I mean, that's very interesting. I'm glad you said that out loud.
I wish I had the statistic in front of me, but there was an interesting study done and that we write about in the book about how when a man loses his job, the family and the family are much more inclined to try and maintain the lifestyle of the family. They will do anything. He will do anything to allow the family to maintain its lifestyle. Does not want to show that they will need to make any changes to their status quo. But when a woman loses her job, they say, well, maybe we can cut back in these areas. Maybe you should take some time. The sense of urgency and the family attention is not around like her getting back to work immediately. And I find that to be incredibly interesting when we think about like the role that gender plays in all of this. And of course, yeah, ego and old cultural scripts about who should be doing what and what it means to provide.
Right. Well, and so in heterosexual relationships, certainly. And I think that there are also relationships where the roles are gendered, a provider role versus a caretaker role. And sometimes it is a woman in a provider role and a man in a caretaker role, but you can still see some of that like discrimination about the worthiness of each person's contributions in that I think is very interesting. And so I know that I don't have all the time in the world with you guys. There's so much to talk about. So I'm wondering if we could roll into some of your pragmatic advice from your book. And of course, you guys, if you want to get all the advice, you're going to want to read the book Money Together. And at the end, we'll talk about where to get more of Douglas and Heather's wonderful advice. But so, I mean, it's some practical strategies. I often have couples come to me in marriage counseling, or maybe they're trying to make some decisions in premarital counseling around sharing finances, right? And in your book, you make the argument that splitting things 50-50 or even like sharing accounts is not always necessarily the path to an egalitarian relationship around money. And so I'm wondering if you can unpack this a little bit and share your recommendations for what does actually work better.
Yeah. So look, the overall goal here is to be able to effectively communicate around money. And that's a lot that you can do in order to do this. And I think most people, well, number one, Heather and I are huge fans of having a regular reoccurring meeting around money. Call it a money date, if you will. I think so tip number one, you're going to want to do this at a time and a place that is convenient for both people. This is not 5 o'clock when you're cooking dinner for the kids or 11:30 at night when everyone's unwinding after a very long day. This is something you'll want to schedule in advance, put reminders on and commit to. That's number one, is time and place. And when you do get to your conversations around money, which you should be having, you want to start not with things that are wrong, not necessarily numbers, budgets, and spreadsheets. These are usually turnoffs for almost anybody, whether you're a man or a woman. You want to start with things you've done right, the positive stuff. What was the win? Celebrate that win. Maybe you're having this meeting over a cocktail and begin the conversation with a toast to the stuff you have done correct before you get into the areas that require improvement. And number two, rather than talk about, numbers, which are sitting right there on a spreadsheet or a piece of paper, why don't you think about goals that you have and the things that you want to accomplish as a team? Because if you have buy-in from the start, you're going to get things started correctly.
And I think you've seen on so many occasions too in practice that it's not really about the way that you have your accounts broken out, right? It's not all about splitting 50-50, about sharing joint accounts, about, you do what works for you. And that's why
these are tactics.
That's why we have this notion of fairness in the subtitle of our book, because fairness is subjective. So it is whatever works for you. But I think what Doug is trying to say too is that whatever setup helps you both feel positively like you are working towards a shared positive goal, that you can get there in the structure in which you've set up, that's great. So if that means that you are splitting everything 50-50, look, I think that's complex as hell. And I think you're going to find yourself in a world of trouble eventually when you've got kids. I think it's difficult. But if that's what works for you, okay, try it. Try it if you both feel positive about it.
And you're allowed to change, right? You're not adopting things that are going to serve you necessarily throughout your entire relationship and life together. You are allowed to go through seasons and make changes based on what's happening around you or what serves you well in that particular season of your life.
That's maybe one of the most important takeaways from the book, I think, is embracing the idea of fluidity between the two of you, fluidity in your roles, fluidity in the way you manage money, fluidity in accepting the unexpected when it comes into your life and finding a way to move through it when things don't go the way you have planned. Like, maybe most of all, yes, fairness, of course, but the fact that you don't know what's going to happen next. And so kind of just embracing that you might have to try a bunch of different ways over the course of your life to find what works at that time.
And that's how you gain the tools, right? You're basically acquiring different tools in your tool belt to serve you as things change. Man plans, God laughs. It is a given.
Tale as old as time.
It is 100% guarantee that things will not go according to plan. But it is your ability to pivot, adjust, be nimble, communicate, and navigate those changes with your partner that separates successful relationships from unsuccessful relationships, from being someone who's going to react to a couple that can be proactive with whatever life serves them up.
Yeah, that the fundamentally most important thing I'm hearing about how couples can operate effectively with money is, first of all, just getting into alignment around shared goals. What do we want, and how are we each going to bend in each other's direction to create the shared financial reality? Because with that, then, of course, you can do all kinds of different strategies and tactics and make different decisions. But if you're not in alignment, you're going to be at each other's throats about what should be happening, and it will rip your relationship apart.
I've seen a lot of hours and a lot of time spent on some pretty beautiful spreadsheets that have amounted to squat.
Nothing, because it's one person's idea about what should be happening, and their partner is not in alignment. And wow. So on a parting note, to wrap this all up, I want to put a beautiful bow on it and leave people feeling inspired. So the subtitle of your book, Money Together, is Become an Unstoppable Financial Team. And I feel like you talked a little bit about this, but I'd love for you to tell a success story. Give me an example of a couple you know or worked with who nailed this and moved from conflict to alignment, did it beautifully. How did they do that? What happened? What changed?
Who do you want?
There's so many. Oh my goodness.
Give us a dramatic the most contentious, conflictual couple, vicious fights that came to you for help. Then what happened?
I don't know.
Are you going to pull from the book or from like a
No, I'll pull from
clients?
both.
Okay.
It's one and the same. I don't know if they were necessarily at each other's throats, but the emotions that were involved could not be any higher. And this was about inheritance. And there is a chapter on, the words we cannot hear when we lose someone. And here was a couple who was not communicating around what a inheritance, a pretty hefty size inheritance, for one of the partners. Her father had passed away and had left behind some money, of course, and she was unable to approach that topic, approach the reality of this, money that was left behind, to the point where just avoiding it. My father had set it up this, he was always in tune with money. If this is the way he set it up, then this is the way he would have wanted, knowing that it completely did not serve not just her, but her household and her partner. And it was a brave and bold move by her partner to say, and I'm sure they had very emotional conversations around this, but eventually it was, listen, this is your money. Do with whatever it is you want to do. But know that I support you if you are willing to take this under your control and have this serve the life that you want, because I believe that's what your father would have wanted for us. But it is yours, and I respect it if you do nothing. And this is a very broad strokes here in terms of the back and forth, and you can only imagine the feelings and heartstrings that are pulled when dealing with the loss of a loved one. But due to that partner stepping up and communicating how they felt and what it meant to them, they were able to move past that roadblock together and hire a financial professional to take the time to translate statements from another language into English to find out what was even going on and empower themselves and become even closer as a couple, discuss their goals that they wish to share together, and put themselves in a better position to be fair. But fairness leads to, and this is the thing that's not in the subtitle, happiness, so that they can be happy together. And we don't get a lot of time here on earth. And if we're going to be smart about how we spend that time, we should be striving to be happy. And the things that we're talking about help you do that.
Yeah, definitely. And that the story that you shared is really that of separation that occurred when one of the partners was frozen and locked in this grief, and her partner wanted her to do something different with that money, but couldn't get through to her. And then it was only through that connection and coming back to I respect you, and what's best for us, right? Like, to have that collaboration is when it melted and they were able to get back into alignment. That's really good. Oh, okay, you guys. So the big takeaway here, the money fights are not about the money. They are about the stories, the core beliefs that each of you learned way more before you ever met. They are related to power, to identity, to respect, to your alignment with each other, or the lack of alignment. And this is really important stuff. And if you want to do a deeper dive, grab Heather and Douglas's book. It is called Money Together. It is out now, and it includes all kinds of stuff, including conversation starters to help you start to have these conversations. And Heather, Douglas, is there anything else you'd like to share about how people can find out more about you, your book, your work, your services? Where should they go?
We could send you to a lot of places. You can visit the book, domoneytogether.com for the book.
Mm-hmm.
You could also sign up for our weekly newsletter where we talk about all things couples and money and many different angles. Lots of fun. That is The Joint Account. And you can find that at readthejointaccount.com.
And if you're interested in learning more about the firm and how we help individuals, you can check out our firm's website at bonefidewealth.com. Suffice to say, you could Google our names or any of these words you heard here, and all roads will lead you to where you need to go.
Amazing. That's so great. I will be sure to follow all of this and follow up with you guys. And I will also just as a quick plug as well, share. So you guys have released so much amazing and helpful information about conversation starters and some ways to crack into all of this stuff. And I will also share as a marriage counselor, if you are not able to have any of these conversations, if the resentment is so profound, or if trust has been broken, or the level of anger and hostility that has taken hold of your relationship, you cannot get through it, do not hesitate to talk to a marriage counselor, particularly one who has experience in financial therapy for couples or financial coaching for couples. This is a very specialized form of couples counseling, and it can be crucially important in unraveling this, because if you cannot talk to each other at all, you cannot work through this in the way that Heather and Douglas is advising. So I just wanted to say that out loud and let people know that there's still another path, because if you try to have these conversations and it blows up in your face, that is not a sign that all is lost. It just means that maybe you needed an additional level of support. Is that the right way to say it, you two? I'm sure you've seen this. Like, yeah.
Fully endorse. And there's many, many heated moments in the book where we will tell you the same, right?
Yeah.
That there is a moment where you need to seek the help of other professionals to help guide you through this moment. And so I echo those sentiments 100%.
Got it.
Thank you. Yeah, that it can be so powerful and sometimes so explosive, that just to be aware of that. All right, you guys. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. This was a pleasure.
Same. Thank you so much for having us.